Salt, white, granulated, powdered ingredient so important in life, slipping easily from our hands like fine sand. It is essential to make food tasty. No matter with how many spices and how much love the food may be cooked, it is incomplete without salt. As if salt is the soul of the food. For the poor, salt is the food's only seasoning. Did you know that in ancient times, salt was known as white gold? Because it was scarce and only found at remote seacoasts. There was even a time when the salary of the Roman army used to be paid in salt, and that is where the word salary came from. Not only this, you will be amazed to know that this seemingly simple gift of nature has over 14,000 known uses in our life. Come, let's take you on a lip-smacking exciting journey, where we will learn everything from extracting the salt from seawater to adding the right quantity of iodine for producing iodized salt. Before we understand the iodization process, let's learn more about effects of iodine on our health. Iodine deficiency is also said to be a disease of the soil. The iodine in the soil often gets washed away with water during natural disasters like avalanches and floods. This leads to loss of iodine in the soil, and thus food produced by plants in such areas directly impact the health of humans and animals. Iodine is one of the micronutrients most essential for mental and physical well-being of human beings. A human requires just about 1 spoon of iodine in their entire lifetime. According to World Health Organization or WHO, a healthy human adult body contains 15 to 20 milligram of iodine. The most effective way of consuming iodine is through iodized salt. When we eat, the iodine in the food gets absorbed by our intestines. 50 to 80% of this iodine stays in the thyroid gland in our throat. Disability and disorders that are caused due to lack of iodine, such as goiter and cretinism, are collectively termed as iodine deficiency disorders. Come, let us learn about the WHO recommended daily iodine intake and the impact of iodine deficiency on human health. For pregnant women, 250 micrograms. Iodine deficiency in pregnant women can lead to abortion and stillbirth and can even be a risk to her own life. For newborns and children up to the age of 6 years, 90 micrograms. Insufficient quantities can lead to hypothyroidism, mental or physical disorders, goiter, or even death. 90% of a child's brain develops during the first 1000 days of the child's life, in which iodine plays a critical role. For children in the age group of 6 to 12 years, 120 micrograms. Iodine deficiency in this age group can cause hypothyroidism, slow mental and physical development or goiter. For children over 12 years of age and adults, 150 micrograms. Iodine deficiency in this age group can cause hypothyroidism, mental and physical disabilities or goiter. Consumption of iodized salt improves the intelligence quotient of children and youth, directly impacting the country's gross domestic product. The Government of India, with the support of development partners, recognized the magnitude of risks occurring from deficiency of iodine and introduced iodized salt through nationwide programs and initiatives to tackle this problem. Fortifying salt with iodine is a simple and cost-effective process, and it does not lead to any change in the taste of salt or the food cooked with it. The credit for establishing the need of iodization of salt in India and its distribution to all strata of society goes to a pioneering research study by Professor V. Ramalingaswamy, conducted in Kangra district of Himachal Pradesh during the period of 1956 to 68. In this study, the goiter endemic areas were divided into 3 zones. In each zone, different types of salt from the group: common salt, salt containing potassium iodide and potassium iodate were distributed. This decade-long study proved that the deficiency of iodine was the causative factor for goiter and that the salt fortified with potassium iodate is more stable than salt fortified with potassium iodide in the Indian environment. The fundamental objective of this program was to ensure the supply of iodized salt to goiter endemic areas. Initially, these areas were restricted only to the hilly terrains. Later studies, like a multicentric study by ICMR conducted in 9 states during 1984 to 1986, reported a goiter prevalence of 21% and endemic cretinism of 0.7%. Another study conducted in 324 districts of the country reported 263 districts were endemic to goiter. The progression of the National Goiter Program was as follows. National Goiter Control Program (NGCP) starts in 1962. Government adopts the Universal Salt Iodization Strategy in 1983, allowing commercial production of iodized salt by the private sector. 1987. Government fixes the minimum level of iodine at production end at 30 ppm, at retailer end at 15 ppm. 1992. NGCP is renamed as the National Iodine Deficiency Disorders Control Program or NIDDCP. 1998. Government imposes a national ban on the sale of non-iodized salt. The ban was temporarily revoked in the year 2000. 2006. The ban is reinstated by the government. 2011. The Food Safety and Standards Act FSSA 2006 adopts the standard as stated in the Prevention of Food Adulteration Act 1954. 2018. The iodine standards are changed to 20 to 30 ppm at production end and 15 to 30 ppm at the distribution end. The central government strictly implemented it through the Food Standards and Safety Authority of India (FSSAI) at the national level and through the various Food and Drugs Control Administrations at the state level. NIDDCP is a program implemented by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. The objectives of the program are efforts to increase the demand for iodized salt, ensure its equitable distribution, and conducting monitoring surveys at the district level. The past few years have witnessed a significant increase in the national coverage of iodized salt at the household level. As per National Family Health Survey 2, the coverage of adequately iodized salt at the household level in 1998-99 was around 49%, which increased to 76% as per the India Iodine Survey 2018-19. Government of India, through a multi-centric approach, is committed to achieve the universal salt iodization target of more than 90% of the households having access to adequately iodized salt. India is the third largest producer of salt in the world, with 30 million metric tons of salt being produced every year, of which around 6.7 million metric tons is used for human consumption. Gujarat contributes 70% to the salt production of the country, followed by Rajasthan at 17% and Tamil Nadu at 12%, while the rest of the states together contribute about 1%. India has 473 salt iodization plants and 131 refineries, with a total production capacity of 22.9 million metric tons. All of these units are registered with the Salt Department, Government of India. Types of edible salt. A properly produced sample of raw salt contains 90 to 96% sodium chloride salt, 1% calcium, 1% magnesium, 1% insoluble matter, and 5 to 8% moisture. The salt crystals collected from the salt pans are brought to the salt processing units for processing and iodization. Salt processing is a multi-stage process. With each stage, impurities are removed to make the salt purer, more attractive, and acceptable to consumer. Each of these steps of improvements require increased capital investment and production costs. From the point of view of processing and its position in value chain, the salt can be categorized in iodized crystal salt, iodized powdered salt, refined iodized salt or free-flow salt, and vacuum evaporated iodized salt. Each country has its own standards for iodine content in salt, which depends on factors like per capita consumption, degree of iodine deficiency in the region, iodine loss during its transportation from production to consumption point, and shelf life of the iodized salt. As per the FSSA 2006 and its regulation, iodized salt is a crystal which is white, light pink or grey in color. It does not contain any soluble or insoluble contaminants like mud particles, grass, impure crystals or any chemicals. Iodized salt conforms to these standards. Moisture, not more than 6% by mass of the undried sample. Sodium chloride, not less than 96% by mass on dry basis. Matter soluble in water other than sodium, not more than 3% by mass on dry basis. Matter insoluble in water, not more than 1% by mass on dry basis. Iodine content 20 to 30 ppm at the production end and 15 to 30 ppm at the distribution channel including the retail end. Anti-caking agent, according to FSSA 2006, the total mass of the anti-caking agent should not exceed 2.2% of the total quantity of salt. Moreover, when calcium, potassium or sodium ferrocyanide are used as anti-caking agents, their quantity must not exceed 10 mg per kg on dry basis. The extraction of salt from the sea or subsoil brine is done by progressive evaporation of the brine using solar heat and natural wind. For evaporation, the salt water called brine is brought into specially constructed ponds. Salt production can be divided into two parts. Firstly, brine management. The initial specific gravity of the brine varies depending on the location. Normally it is between 1.020 to 1.025, that is around 3 degree BE. Due to solar evaporation, the brine concentrates to 1.21, that is 25 degree BE. Initially the brine is collected in large ponds known as reservoirs. It is then slowly passed through smaller ponds known as condensers. This increases the brine's concentration and removes dissolved chemical impurities such as sulfates and chlorates. This brine is then pumped into smaller ponds having depths of about 20 cm called crystallizers. When the brine reaches the density of 25 to 29 degrees, the salt crystals precipitate at the bottom of the pond. The leftover brine or bittern is pumped out. It is important to note that the bittern must not be reused for making salt, as it contains chemical impurities and impairs the quality of raw salt. Secondly, harvesting. We just saw salt farms. The next step is the extraction of salt. This is the second and last stage in salt production. For harvesting, the first layer of the salt is allowed to settle to form a permanent bed in the salt pan. This prevents the salt particles from mixing with the salt crystals. The layer of the salt above this layer is harvested manually or by mechanical harvesters. The salt thus harvested is also known as wet salt. These crystals are once again washed with brine to dissolve impurities. The raw salt is then stored in salt heaps. The salt crystals collected from the salt pans are brought to the salt processing units for processing and iodization. Salt processing is a multi-stage process. The process of salt iodization is a simple yet important one. It can be easily added to an existing salt production line for producing iodized salt. Salt is iodized by uniformly spraying 5% concentrated potassium iodate solution over it. This is called the wet method. In the wet method, A 5% potassium iodate solution is produced by mixing it with water. This solution is then evenly mixed with the salt. It is important to mix the salt thoroughly after the addition of potassium iodate. Not mixing the salt thoroughly may result in the production of iodized salt with non-uniform iodine or substandard salt. Come, let's understand the process of preparing the potassium iodate solution and testing its strength. The iodine converts to potassium iodate in the ratio of 1:1.685. Thus, to obtain 25 mg per kg of iodine, we would need 42 mg of potassium iodate per kg of salt or 42 gram of it per ton. Preparation of potassium iodate solution. To prepare 22 metric tons of iodized salt, dissolve 1 kg of potassium iodate in 20 liters of lukewarm potable water. Stick a label on the container of the solution. This solution, which can be used 12 hours after preparation, should be filtered with a cloth to remove the undissolved matter. This helps in filtering out the undissolved particles if any are present. To assess the strength of the potassium iodate solution, take 1 ml of potassium iodate solution and dilute it up to 250 ml in distilled water in a volumetric flask. Take 25 ml of diluted solution in an idiometric flask. Add 5 ml of 2-normality sulfuric acid to it, followed by 5 ml of 10% potassium iodate solution. Place this iodometric flask in a dark place for 10 minutes. Titrate the solution with 0.005 normality hypo sodium thiosulfate solution. It is calculated as shown. Besides, some additives can also be mixed in the salt like anti-caking agents that prevent the adjacent grains of salt from cementing together, forming a hard solid mass, or crystal modifiers to provide the crystals with a mechanical coating to act as a lubricant, absorbing the moisture inside the packet. There are 4 main ways of iodizing the salt. First is knapsack. This method is not advised. Second is the mobile iodization plant. Third, fixed line iodization plant. And fourth, salt refinery. Salt mixing using the knapsack process. The best way to produce adequately iodized salt are the iodization units. Use of hand sprayers for salt iodization is not recommended, as the mixing of the salt is not uniform, resulting in production of non-uniformly iodized salt. However, if hand sprayers are used for salt iodization, some important points must be kept in mind. It must be ensured that iodine is sprayed uniformly. Depending upon the market order and the number of packing personnel, it is recommended to separately create small salt piles besides the large pile. The potassium iodate solution should be mixed uniformly into each of the small piles. The salt should be packed only after 30 minutes of the completion of the iodization process. In all salt plants, there are 4 main units that are followed. Hopper unit, raw salt processing unit, iodine dosing unit, and storage and packing unit. A mobile iodization plant where crystal salt is produced consists of hopper, iodine dosing unit, screw conveyor for iodization, and manual packaging line. A fixed iodization unit producing powdered salt uses hopper, raw salt conveyor, iodine dosing unit, drip method in case of non-washed salt, crushing unit, washing tanks, centrifuge, iodine dosing unit, drip method in case of washed salt, screw conveyor for iodization, and manual packaging line. A line producing refined free-flow salt uses hopper, raw salt conveyor, iodine dosing unit using drip method where non-washed salt is used, crushing unit, washing tanks, centrifuge, fluid bed dryer, vibro screens, pin mill, iodine dosing unit, drip method in case of washed salt, bucket elevator, and packing machines. Now we will look at the plant more closely to understand its maintenance, which is of 2 types. First, preventive maintenance, and second, breakdown maintenance. Preventive maintenance, which is planned, reduces production interruption due to breakdowns. Another good practice is to log the energy meter readings prior to starting the salt plant. This helps in monitoring the plant's power consumption. Any abnormal rise or fall in this can be an indication of a machine requiring maintenance. When the salt first arrives in the plant, it is dumped in a funnel-like structure called hopper. The hopper feeds the raw salt to the salt conveyor belt, which takes it to the roller mill. The hopper has a slide valve for uniform feeding of raw salt, and the conveyor has magnetic separators to detect and remove iron debris from the salt. Maintenance of hopper and raw salt conveyor. Hopper typically requires 1 or 2 workers to monitor the conveyor belt. It is sometimes possible for the workers to get covered by the salt coming from above. Therefore, it is recommended to cover the hopper's opening with steel bars. Appropriate level of raw salt must be maintained in the feeding hopper. It should be ensured that the conveyor belt is optimally tensed. If it is found to be too tight or too loose, the adjustment screws should be adjusted. An extra tight conveyor belt can cause the belt to wear sooner, and a loose one can cause the machine to consume more electricity than required. The belt should be regularly checked for any wear and tear or corrosion, and should be changed or repaired if required. The bearings of the conveyor belt should be manually observed daily for any abnormal sound or signs of wear and tear. They should also be oiled and greased every 7 days. The motor powering the conveyor belt should be oiled and greased every 15 days, lest it may lead to a lower electric deficiency. The magnetic separators should be cleaned from time to time, as they may not work if they are too full. The raw salt conveyor belt transfers the salt to a roller mill, or in some plants, a wet mill. The mills grind the large lumps or crystals of salt and transfers it to the washing tanks, where the salt is mixed with water. This causes the impurities of the salt to come on the top, where they are separated, and the purified brine is fed to the next washing tank through a slurry pump. Most salt plants have a 3-step washing process with 3 washing tanks and 3 slurry pumps connected in a series. Each washing tank makes the salt progressively cleaner. After passing through the 3 washing tanks, the purified salt is then fed to the centrifuge. Maintenance of the roller mill, wet mill, slurry pumps and washing tanks. The units having wet mills have beaters, which get corroded with time and are required to be replaced every 7 to 8 months. The beaters should be carefully checked at least once every week and replaced if required. In the plants having roller mills, the mill should be cleaned every time the plant is stopped. Oil level of the slurry pumps should be inspected manually daily and topped up if necessary. The slurry pumps have an impeller that pushes the slurry up. The impeller should be checked for wear and tear once every month and replaced if necessary. The slurry pumps should be checked for mechanical leakage daily. The suction valves of the washing tanks should be closed immediately in case of a power failure, lest it may lead to the washing tanks emptying out through the centrifuge. The centrifuge is one of the most important parts of a salt refinery. It is a specialized machine that removes water from salt. It has 2 circular screens that push the salt solution while also rotating it at high speeds. Maintenance of the centrifuge. The centrifuge must be washed thoroughly every time it stops, whether in case of a power cut or a routine stoppage. The centrifuge is powered by a hydraulic oil. The oil level of the centrifuge should be checked daily and topped up if required. The hydraulic oil's temperature must not be allowed to cross 60 degrees. When the centrifuge is in operation, the friction can cause thinning of the oil. This may lead to it getting leaked and mixed with salt. Therefore, the centrifuge should be checked very carefully for signs of oil leakage, and if detected, it must be immediately repaired. The following important parts of the centrifuge should be checked every week for breakage or corrosion, like screens, feed cone, scraper and bearing. The salt refined from the centrifuge is sent for iodization. In the plants that have a fluid bed dryer, the iodization happens after drying. Most iodization plants use screw conveyors, where the potassium iodate solution drips on powdered salt coming from the centrifuge. In some cases, the anti-caking agent is also mixed with the salt here. Maintenance of the screw conveyor and iodization unit. Screw conveyor is a mechanical part, therefore it requires regular oiling and greasing of the moving parts. Weekly oiling or greasing should be done in the motor, the gearbox and the shaft. It is important to note that the oil is not leaking, as that may result in its getting mixed with the edible salt. The iodization tank, pipe and dripping nozzle should be inspected twice daily for signs of deposits on the nozzle's tip. The deposits, if any, should be clean, lest they may result in inadequate iodization of salt. Also, if the ppm value of iodine during the sample testing is found to be abnormally high or low, the nozzle should be checked and cleaned if necessary. It's advisable to clean the nozzles by immersing them in boiling potable water for 30 minutes whenever required, or at least once every week. The salt is next transferred to the fluidized bed dryer, where it is dried with the help of 3 fans: the hot air fan, the cold air fan and the exhaust fan. Maintenance of the fluid bed dryer or the fluidized bed dryer. The fluid bed dryer should be cleaned with clean water every 15 days or whenever the plant is closed for preventive maintenance. The 3 fans of the dryer and the radiator should be cleaned with air every 15 days or whenever the plant is being closed for preventive maintenance. The dryer is heated with the thermic fluid oil, which is heated in a boiler. Maintenance of the boiler. The boiler should be cleaned every 2 to 3 hours. Every 15 days, when the boiler is closed, it should be cleaned thoroughly from inside. The fire bricks installed inside should be checked and replaced if required. The boiler uses the thermic fluid oil to transfer the heat to the fryer. The oil level should be checked carefully and topped up if required. Typically, this oil needs to be topped up by up to 15% every year. The salt from the fluid bed dryer is transferred to vibro screens to screen out its oversized particles. The right-sized particles are sent to the production line for packaging, while the oversized particles are transferred to the pin mill. After crushing, these particles are once again passed through vibro screens. The right-sized particles thus collected are sent to the production line for packaging. Maintenance of the vibro screens. The vibro screens should be cleaned once a day with a hard brush. Vibro screens should be checked daily for any holes or signs of wear and tear. If required, the screen should be replaced immediately. The salt coming out of the vibro screens and pin mill is lifted by a bucket elevator to be fed into the packaging machines. Maintenance of the bucket elevator. The bucket elevator has a number of buckets mounted on a belt. It should be checked for alignment and wear and tear every month. The gears of the bucket elevator should be oiled and greased every 15 days. The salt from the bucket elevator is fed to the packing machines, where the salt packets in various sizes are packed. Maintenance of the packing machines. The packing machines should be oiled every 15 days and cleaned once a day with compressed air. It is recommended to collect one sample every 2 hours from the packing area. These samples should be tested for iodine through iodometric titration. Another sample should also be drawn from the packaging area and tested for moisture and particle size every 8 hours. In case the salt produced does not meet the standards, it must be rejected and passed through the production process again. The salt must be passed for marking only when the sample drawn passes all the requirements including iodine content. Additionally, a composite sample should be prepared from the samples drawn throughout the day, and it should also be tested for all the requirements. If any sample of the day fails to meet any of the requirements, then the entire production of that day should be considered unfit for marking. Maintenance of equipment is important for effective iodization to maintain the quality of the salt production. To maintain the quality of the salt produced, packaging as per the standards is extremely important. The material of the packaging and its labeling are also equally important. Any omission in this can lead to prosecution by Food and Drug Control Administration under the Food Safety and Standards Act 2006. Generally, the packaging materials are of 3 types. First, LDPE, that is the plastic with less density that provides low moisture permeability. Second, HDPE, which is a material with higher tensile strength. And thirdly, PP laminated pouch, that is LDPE pouches with polypropylene lamination. Iodine is best retained in pouches of less than 2 kg, as it does not allow moisture in the environment to interact with the soil, which may liberate the iodine. As per the FSSA Packaging and Labeling Regulations 2011, the norms for packaging every food article are: name of the food article, declaration of its being vegetarian, nutritional information, list of ingredients used in the food, declaration regarding food additives, net quantity of the food article, manufacturing and packaging date, code number, lot number and batch number, full name and address of the producer, best before date, name of the country the product was manufactured in, and finally, instructions of usage. Additionally, iodized salt should be represented with a smiling sun logo. The storage and distribution of the salt are also of utmost importance. It requires adhering to a few strict rules. Iodized salt must be stored in a closed and dry warehouse and should be stocked on a wooden platform or a tarpaulin sheet away from the walls. In the absence of warehouse, salt bags should be covered tightly with a tarpaulin sheet. The salt bags should be kept safe from direct sun and moisture. The salt bags should be dispatched following the first in first out or FIFO method or FIFO method. This ensures a faster circulation of the salt in the storehouse, while also making sure that the salt is kept in good condition. Regular maintenance of the warehouse is also important to ensure that good quality salt reaches the consumers. Quality assurance and quality control. FSSA 2006 provides quality standards for iodized salt. Quality assurance and quality control are 2 of its critical components and help in ensuring that the product is as per the standards. Quality assurance is the systematic process of checking to see whether the product or service being developed is meeting the specified requirements. Quality control is the system of maintaining standards in product manufacturing by testing a sample of the output against the laid out specifications. Following good manufacturing practices, routine factory maintenance. Quality assurance and quality control are essential components for ensuring that the quality of the final product adheres to the product standards. Each quality control laboratory has its own quality assurance protocol which includes testing the reagent against a known value sample and plotting it on the Levy-Jennings graph. This process includes preparing 10 samples of salt from 1 kg uniformly iodized refined salt and testing them for their iodine content. This is followed by calculating ±2 standard deviation of these 10 results. The remaining quantity of the salt is divided into samples of 25 grams, packed in zip-locked pouches and stored in silica desiccators. Before testing the production sample, it is important to standardize the quality of the reagent and the working of the equipment and apparatus. Before testing the production sample, it is important to standardize the quality of the reagent and the working of the equipment and apparatus. This is ensured by testing one known value salt sample from the lots created earlier. If the iodine content of the known value samples deviates beyond ±2 standard deviation, then the used reagent must be discarded and a fresh one should be prepared. This process should be repeated till the iodine result of the known value samples does not come within ±2 standard deviation. After this, the testing of the production samples can be started. The iodine content of the known value result can also be plotted on a Levy-Jennings graph. The quality control lab should also be benchmarked against an external accredited laboratory, wherein the NABL accredited laboratory develops 6 known value samples every month and sends it to the affiliated laboratory. Higher the number of salt samples within the ±2 standard deviation of the accredited lab result, better is the standard of the quality control laboratory. Iodine content of the salt is tested by iodometric titration. The equipment required for iodometric titration are laboratory balance, beakers 100, 200, 500 ml, glass bottles with stoppers for reagents 1000 ml and 250 ml, open pan balance for weighing the salt samples, 50 ml measuring cylinders with stoppers, wash bottles of 500 ml, 200 ml conical flask with a stopper, plastic or glass funnel, calibrated auto dispensers, and burette 10 ml auto zeros. The chemicals required for this test are sodium thiosulfate, concentrated sulfuric acid, potassium iodide, soluble chemical starch, and double distilled water. For preparing the sodium thiosulfate solution, dissolve 0.31 grams of sodium thiosulfate in 250 ml double distilled water. Store the solution in a dark place at room temperature. It may be noted that the normality of the solution is likely to change with time. It is therefore advisable to prepare only a small quantity of it each day as required. This prevents any change in its quality due to a change in normality or effects of storage. Next, we prepare 2 normality sulfuric acid solution. We slowly add 5.56 ml concentrated sulfuric acid in 90 ml double distilled water. Then add additional double distilled water to it to make 100 ml. This solution should also be kept in a cold and dark place. This solution can be stored and used for a long time. It should be remembered that acid must always be added to water and never water to acid. Not following this can even have fatal results. To prepare potassium iodide solution, dissolve 10 grams potassium iodide in 100 ml double distilled water. If stored properly, this solution can be used for about 6 months. For preparation of saturated sodium chloride solution, keep adding sodium chloride in boiling double distilled water while stirring it continuously until no more of it dissolves. Finally, the process of preparing the starch solution. Weigh 1 gram of soluble starch in 10 ml double distilled water and boil the solution. Add 90 ml of saturated sodium chloride solution to make it up to 100 ml. Add a pinch of sodium benzoate as a preservative. We now come to the procedure for the iodine test. Weigh 10 grams of salt and put it in a stoppered conical flask. Now add 50 ml of distilled water and dissolve the salt. Now, with the help of an automatic dispenser, add 1 ml of 2 normality sulfuric acid solution. Immediately after that, add 1 ml of 10% potassium iodide solution with the help of an automatic dispenser. Now close the conical flask with a stopper. If the solution contains iodine, it will turn yellow. Keep the flask in a dark place for 10 minutes to avoid exposure to light. After 10 minutes, remove the flask and titrate against 0.005 normality sodium thiosulfate. During the titration, when the yellow color turns light yellow, add 2 drops of the starch solution as an external indicator. The solution will become purple. Continue titration, adding sodium thiosulfate drop by drop till the solution becomes colorless. Note the burette reading. We will next calculate the iodine's ppm value. Multiply the burette reading with 10.58. The answer is the iodine ppm value. It is necessary to follow same precautions in this experiment. The starch solution must only be added at the end of the titration, when very little iodine is left and the solution has a faint yellow color. If the starch is added earlier, the iodine-starch complex becomes very strong and reacts too slowly with sodium thiosulfate. This can result in an inflated or false reading. Titration must be done in a cool room because iodine is volatile and the sensitivity of the starch indicator diminishes as the temperature rises. The reaction mixture must be kept in the dark room for 10 minutes before titration, because firstly, this ensures that the reaction between the potassium ions and oxygen is slow, and secondly, light accelerates a side reaction in which iodide ions are oxidized to iodine by atmospheric oxygen. Spot testing kits or STKs are used for semi-quantitative estimation of iodine content of salt at the consumer end and are used by monitoring agencies and community awareness. These are not recommended for testing the iodine content at the salt iodization units. An STK sufficient for testing 200 samples consists of 2 white ampules of 10 ml of test solution and 1 red ampule of recheck solution, a detailed instruction sheet in the local language, a color chart with circular color spots, and a small container. Now let's understand the procedure of testing the iodized salt using STK. Fill the container with salt. Open the test solution ampule by piercing it with a pin and release 1 drop of the test solution on the salt surface. The reaction would liberate the iodine of the salt, and depending on the content of the iodine, the solution would change the color of the salt to light or deep purple. The changed color of the salt can be matched with the color chart on the pack to determine the ppm value of the iodine in the salt. If there is an alkaline agent present in the salt sample would not change the color, even if iodine is present in it. In such a case, add 2 drops of the recheck solution and conduct a retest following the same procedure. Towards the future. India's salt iodization program has been a public health success story globally. Apart from the various policies and laws of the Government of India, a critical contributing factor to the success has been the role played by the salt industry in proactively adopting the technology and best practices. As the industry consolidates, training modules such as this shall help new processors and professionals in understanding the nuances of the iodization program, salt industry, and its production process. This would facilitate the achievement of universal salt iodization. Considering that we require iodine daily in small quantities and that iodized salt is the primary source of iodine in our daily diet, it is important that the FDCA regularly monitors production, distribution, and consumption of iodized salt and enforces FSSA standards. Besides this, the NIDDCP should be effectively implemented and periodically reviewed. The protocol for the National Family Health Survey should be amended to include quantitative assessment of iodine in salt rather than the existing qualitative one. Also, existing government programs and platforms such as Village Health and Nutrition Day, Gram Sabha, National Nutrition Mission can be leveraged to disseminate the information or importance of consuming iodized salt, so that this intervention is sustainable, thus ensuring that iodine reaches everyone in adequate quantities. Building on the success in reducing iodine deficiency, salt is being considered as a vehicle to deliver multiple micronutrients. Double fortified salt, that is, salt fortified with both iodine and iron, is an innovative product. This would make salt not just a vehicle for iodine, but also for iron, thus help preventing iron deficiency anemia.